This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, a Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. I am your host, Darren McKee, and with me, as the new usual, is Adam Gardner.
What's up, cuboids?
We have a great show for you today. Adam is going to discuss Mickey Mouse. Hi there, everyone, and copyright. But first, I'm going to talk to you about whether poinsettias are poisonous. Like the segment I did on the last show, whether poinsettias are poisonous was inspired by conversations over the holidays with family members. I brought one of these plants to where I was staying, and I think I was touching one of the leaves, it's a nice texture, and was told to be careful because they are poisonous. Mostly to children or pets, it was stated, but you probably want to be careful and you should wash your hands. But is all this necessary? Let's find out.
I definitely thought this was true for a long time because I was told not to bring. I had a poinsettia that I had at work. Someone told me, don't bring it home. Your cats will eat it. It's poison. They could die. So I left it at work. So I had this poinsettia at my office for years.
And I killed 4 colleagues.
Well, I think it's more like adults don't eat random leaves, but maybe some could, you know.
It depends how they're rolled. Yes. All right. So for some context, the poinsettia is indigenous to Mexico and Central America, and of course is known for use in various Christmas displays. Over 70 million plants are sold in the United States in about a 6-week period.
Wow.
Obviously around the holidays. Mm-hmm. And for many years, one guy, Paul Ecke Ranch, his ranch and his people, his company provided 70% of the U.S. market and half the worldwide market.
Wow.
They sold to a larger firm over 10 years ago because it's just hard to compete. As stated on the Wikipedia, the plant derives its common English name from Joel Roberts Poinsett, the first United States minister to Mexico, who is credited with introducing the plant to the U.S. in the 1820s. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, okay, but are these toxic? Can I eat them? Well, no, and yes, but maybe you shouldn't. The notion that poinsettias are anything like cyanide or some extreme chili pepper that can't be ingested or touched does not match reality. The idea seems to come from an urban legend spread in 1919 about a 2-year-old dying after consuming a poinsettia leaf. Now, it's possible a child did actually die from poisoning, and it was a mistaken attribution. Anyway, it was for this reason that the poinsettia was included in a 1944 book on poisonous plants, even though the author, R.H. Arnold, admitted there was only hearsay and no evidence that these things were harmful, but that's why poinsettias were thought to be deadly. But that was around World War II. What about something from around Vietnam? Well, in 1970, the FDA said in a newsletter that, quote, 1 poinsettia leaf can kill a child.
Wow.
But are they harmful at all? Well, anything can be. It just depends on the dose. We've talked before about how water can even be poisonous too, or toxic is maybe a better phrase. According to the Poisindex Information Service, a 50-pound child would have to eat about 500 to 600 leaves to exceed experimental doses.
Wow.
Yes. So if you have that many poinsettia plants, you're probably a gardener of some type.
I am.
Now, there is no confirmed death ever attributed to poinsettias, but there could be some nausea or vomiting or a skin rash if there's some external contact. But most people are fine and most people have nothing to worry about. I don't know of anyone making a poinsettia Christmas salad. And even if you did eat some, it would probably just be fine. Would it really be worse than kale? I kid. Now, apparently it would be worse because it tastes awful, supposedly, this leaf. I haven't tried it myself.
Kale also tastes awful.
Yes. So, don't worry so much. If you have a small pet and it eats an entire plant, this will probably cause a mess one way or another from that pet. But that's much like when pets eat almost any large plant. A lot of it, right? It's unlikely to kill your pet. It's unlikely to kill your child. It's okay for you to touch it. And I guess if you want, you could try eating it. But generally speaking, no, these are not toxic plants.
It's funny that I heard that they were bad for cats when cats are straight up carnivores. They do not eat plants. They will often eat, I guess they don't ingest plants. They will often eat grass. They will often eat leaves and vomit. Like it's, I don't understand why, but it's part of how a cat kind of cleans out their stomach. So this is why I don't have plants at home because, forget about poinsettias. I don't want to have my cats making a friggin' mess by eating plants and throwing up everywhere and digging dirt up. But yeah, so I imagine if a cat did manage to eat a poinsettia leaf, they would just puke it up like it was grass or, cat grass or any other normal leaf.
Might be some disturbing red color, which you might then think is blood. But I don't know.
Maybe.
Depending how long on that digestive system, I guess.
Yeah.
So enjoy the plants. They look beautiful and they feel just fine. Enjoy them.
What do people do? I feel like people throw these plants out at the end of the Christmas season because I don't see people with just poinsettias.
Well, yeah, I think the market is really around Christmas. It's interesting because I bought this little plant and it lasted for weeks. It's a little container and it's a beautiful red. There's not that many plants that have such a beautiful red that are so easy to maintain. So I say more poinsettias around all year.
Yeah, I think there's something specific about getting the color red so the leaves will be green, and you need to have it in the light for a certain amount of hours in the day so that the leaves will change color the right way. And that probably it's dependent on like what the sun exposure would have been at a certain time of year when you grow them, right?
Maybe that's a future segment. I
never did the test because I had this poinsettia at my desk that was just green right after it became green.
Right.
And it was green forever and eventually died. All my plants died.
So not really forever, Adam. I guess you lied just a moment ago.
Gardener in the moly. But no, I had it it was a couple of years and it never turned red again.
You know what I think about when I think about poinsettias? I think about copyright and Mickey Mouse. By any chance, do you have anything related to that?
I do, Darren.
Oh, I feel relieved.
You may have seen images of an early Mickey Mouse doing some terrible things recently. The internet rejoiced on January 1st as the character became public domain. Or did he?
Oh.
Was it Mickey Mouse or was it Steamboat Willie? Was it actually on the first? What's this about not using his gloves or the color of his pants? So there's a lot of conflicting information that's been going around, so I felt it might be worthwhile to talk about copyright, trademark, how public domain works, and using Mickey Mouse as an example to illustrate some of these complexities. So there is copyright and trademark. They are not the same thing. Public domain applies to copyright, not to trademark. So the Mickey Mouse thing is about copyright. Copyrights are the rights which protect people who create some work, a story, a play or film, a piece of music, a work of art, including photos, paintings, sculptures, or a comic strip. These are all covered by copyright. Trademarks relate to a company's name, product names, branding like logos, slogans, and such. So a Disney logo with mouse ears, that's a trademark. You can't steal that yet. You can't really steal that at all. Steamboat Willie is a short film, which is the first public appearance of Mickey Mouse. That work is subject to copyright, and the work is now public domain. Disney also has a trademark on the name Disney, Mickey Mouse, logos which include the mouse ears, things like that. Sometimes you'll see a C with a little circle around it for copyright or a little TM for trademark. This kind of thing or registration of a work with a copyright office or registering a trademark is not required for the protection to take place, but it might be useful to do so for other reasons. For example, a published work automatically gets covered by copyright, but registering a work with the U.S. Copyright Office can have benefits. If someone intends to file a lawsuit in the U.S. over copyright infringement, they will need to register the work first. This can be done after the infringement took place so that registration is not necessary to protect a work, but it is needed to go through the legal steps. So, you can sue for damages, even if the infringement took place before registration. However, in the US, if you want to sue for statutory damages or to reclaim attorney's fees, you need to have registered your copyright prior to the infringement taking place or within 3 months of publication. Precedents for statutory damages define a precise value for loss suffered in certain cases, when the damage is often hard to prove otherwise in cases of copyright infringement. So, you sold a pirated copy of Steamboat Willie. How does that affect the money I might have made? Many people may have paid for it, may not have. Did you keep good records on the piracy? Probably not. So it's hard to prove, but statutory damages related to a copyright or trademark will be calculated as a multiple of the price that would have been paid to use that property. So if you're a big business with a work and you expect it to be popular, it's valuable to get it registered for this reason. You can basically make money if someone tries to steal your work.
Yes, the counterfactual math.
Mm-hmm. Registering the work also clearly proves the validity of the copyright. In Canada, it isn't required to submit a copy of the work when filing for copyright, but it is when you register it in the US. Because of this, a Canadian might want to register a US copyright to lock in and prove the content that you're copywriting. This doesn't necessarily prove that the work you submitted was your creation, but depending on the timing, it strengthens your case. If you register a copyright, you are the sole person to register that copyright and it isn't contested, and you will later have a strong case to show that it is in fact your work if infringement occurs. So, let's get back to Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse entered the public domain January 1st, 2024. Why? What's that date about? This one was long anticipated because for a while it seemed like the rules about when something would become public domain would keep changing just to avoid Mickey Mouse being affected. And there are many reasons for which something can enter the public domain. They can expire, which is what happened here. They can be forfeited or intentionally waived, or they may just not apply. So very old works, they're in the public domain because they predate copyright law even existing. So go ahead and hold your very own performance of your favorite Shakespeare play. Don't worry about any legal ramifications.
Or those Pride and Prejudice and zombie books.
Exactly. So in the case of Mickey Mouse, it entered the public domain because the copyright expired, and the timing of that expiration varies depending on the type of work. For books, in many countries, a copyright expires 100 years after the death of the author. The United States is an exception to this, where the copyright only lasts until January the 1st, 95 years from the year of publication. So, works published up to and including 1928 are public domain in the US. But if they're published elsewhere, it may depend on how old that author lived. For music in the US, it depends. The written composition itself, so the sheet music, lyrics, or whatever, are public domain if they were written before 1925. But the recording is covered by different rules. Anything over 95 years is currently in the public domain. And then from 1923 to 1972, it varies based on state laws. So I'm not going to get into all of those, but there's a bunch of different rules. After 1972, it's life of the author plus 70 years or 95 years after release. This is common for other types of media as well. Movies, and this includes Steamboat Willie. In the US, where Steamboat Willie was released, any movie published before 1978 is copyrighted for 95 years. It becomes public domain on January 1st, following 95 years from its original publication date. But a restored, dubbed, or subtitled version of a movie can be the subject of copyright. For example, a silent film can get a new soundtrack. That version would be protected by copyright as of the date of that soundtrack being recorded. This doesn't affect the original work, so one could freely distribute a silent version of a film even if there's a version with a soundtrack that has a copyright. The movie Metropolis, for example, is in the public domain as of last year since it was released in 1927. The original score was not recorded until 2001, so that copyright will remain for a very long time. You can't download a DVD rip of this movie that has that 2001 soundtrack. An edited 1984 version by Giorgio Moroder, which had subtitles and special effects added and had a score of popular music from the time, would similarly be copyrighted based as if it was a work created in 1984. So the movie is public domain. The soundtrack, for the most part, is not.
Somewhat relatedly, people may be aware that Taylor Swift re-recorded some of her songs, Taylor's version.
Yep.
So then she could have more power over that content, that copyright, and the royalties thereof.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's not a public domain issue, but
No.
yeah, there are certain rules related to that. So
Yeah, it has nothing to do with public domain. It's more just like copyright is used in different ways to achieve different goals.
yes, absolutely. So back to Mickey. It's a movie. It's been 95 years since its original release, and so that became public domain January 1st, 2024. But that number has been the result of numerous extensions by the United States Congress, as I mentioned before. It first would have entered the public domain in 1955, but then it was renewed until 1986. The Copyright Act of 1976 extended that copyright to 2003. And then in 1998, it was further extended to 2023.
That's a lot of high-paid lawyers.
Yes. So a lot of people, including myself, were expecting that some other change would occur prior to January 1st, 2024 to further protect Mickey Mouse. But clearly that didn't happen. He's public domain. So here we are. After January 1st, following 95 years from the year of the release of Steamboat Willie, with the short that had the character Mickey Mouse in it, enters the public domain. The character enters the public domain. Mickey Mouse actually first appeared in Plain Crazy, another animated short. It was screened to a private audience in 1928 and then released publicly in 1929. Plain Crazy entered the public domain January 1st, 2024, along with Steamboat Willie. So either way you cut it, Mickey Mouse became public domain on the same date. The modern image of Mickey Mouse may not be okay. A lot of what is included in his iconic look is actually public domain. Mickey Mouse is the name of the character in Steamboat Willie and Plain Crazy, so that name and character are public domain. They don't call him Steamboat Willie and avoid the name Mickey Mouse. He's very clearly called that. So these are black and white films, and Mickey Mouse doesn't have gloves in Steamboat Willie, causing many to claim that you can't use Mickey Mouse with his gloves, or you can't use a colored version of Mickey Mouse or colors on his clothes. But there is a 1928 poster which shows Mickey with gloves and red pants. He looks something like the modern image of Mickey Mouse, and that image is public domain. Minnie Mouse also appears in Steamboat Mickey, but she looks different. She doesn't have the same kind of clothes and the same kind of look as the modern Mickey Mouse, so you wouldn't be able to do much with Minnie Mouse. So Donald, Goofy, the rest of the gang, they weren't in anything in 1928. So they're not included. They are not public domain. Other incarnations of Mickey Mouse are not included. So King Mickey, as he appears in Kingdom Hearts, will not be public domain for a very long time. I don't even know when that would be.
I don't even know what that is.
It's a video game.
Oh.
It's a very good video game.
Okay. That came out in the 1930s?
No, it's a PlayStation 2 game. So
well, right. So,
not out in 1928.
Okay, so it's not that relevant to this particular situation.
No. So this is an important kind of thing to consider. Mickey Mouse isn't popular because of Steamboat Willie. He's popular for various things he's done in the past 100 years. The character isn't all that interesting. No one stands to profit greatly from making their own Mickey Mouse cartoons. He's an icon for Disney, but he's strongly associated with the Disney brand. They still own that Disney brand. They don't lose any right to use the character. They just lose exclusivity over certain properties that he's in and certain of his usage. So I don't really see how this could have any negative effect on the company, honestly. I don't see how they could lose much over this. And most of the uses we've seen recently were probably fine all along as parody is covered by fair use. So fair use is vaguely defined. Sometimes it becomes difficult to justify. A lot of what should be fair use often gets flagged and removed from sites like YouTube. So it is maybe still useful. Even if what people are doing with Mickey Mouse is likely fair use, it's easier now that he's in the public domain, especially since Disney is pretty big on going after people who use their copyrighted characters. You know, it might be fair use, but they might go after them anyway.
Yeah, there's these quirky things around fair use, with slightly different laws in Canada and the United States. Mm-hmm. But in short, if you're making fun of something, and sometimes if you're just commenting on it, then you get to use it in a certain way, right? And that's why you see these so-called reaction videos that pop up, which to me are often just terrible and parasitic.
Absolutely.
Once in a while useful, but most of the time just parasitic. And you're like, I'm just watching someone poorly react to something. Just let me show the original thing, but they can't for certain reasons, right? Yeah. All that to say is I think that's another interesting domain. Like, well, how can you just make fun of things? Like, well, because we have laws and orders in a relatively free country where you can make fun of people in power or large corporations and you're largely protected. To the Mickey Mouse issue, it could be that Disney's like, well, this is bad in one ways, but it's a lot of free advertising in other ways, right?
Oh, maybe.
A lot more Mickey.
See it that way, but
oh, I'm sure they don't, but like, well, okay, you don't want Mickey in, well, certainly sexually explicit situations, perhaps, as one example, but many ways that people use this just means more Mickey everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like shows like Robot Chicken are a thing. They use tons of copyrighted characters, but it's for comedy, it's whatever, and it's no one goes after them. It's okay, you know. Family Guy still has shows. Now, another thing that's worth considering is that copyrights can vary by country, but despite that, most countries will agree to honor the rules and they're somewhat aligned. So the Berne Copyright Convention, which covers the US and Canada and has 181 country members, has these principles. Each member country must provide the same copyright protection to other member countries when their works are used in their country. This is called national treatment. National treatment applies even if a certain right doesn't exist in the work's country of origin. Protection must be provided without any formalities such as registration or using the international copyright symbol. Okay, but what about countries which don't respect copyrights? So while there are a handful of countries that don't have copyright laws, the bigger problem is when a country won't enforce copyright laws. So perhaps a country will protect their own copyrights, their own country's copyrighted materials, but not others, or something is technically illegal, but there's just rampant ignored piracy. With something like movie piracy, this is often tolerated if no profit is involved. So in Canada, it's legal to download, upload, or publish copyrighted content if you aren't making a profit, but a studio can still have your ISP email you and threaten to do something about it. In the US, it is illegal, but they don't really usually do anything about it. So I'm into anime, and back in the day, there was always bootlegs out of like Taiwan or Hong Kong. These were clearly not official products. Happened a lot with CDs and VCDs, eventually DVDs when DVD became a thing. But despite the rumors that people used to talk about over at the University of Ottawa Anime Club, this wasn't because Hong Kong didn't have copyright laws or anything like that. From 1957 to 1987, Hong Kong followed the United Kingdom's Copyright Act of 1956, and then after 1997, they started to follow Chinese copyright laws. The difference between Hong Kong and the United Kingdom or China was simply that copyright violations were tolerated, not that they were legal. And these things that I got in Canada, either from the internet or from sketchy stores in Chinatown, they weren't legal either, but they just weren't a big enough business to warrant cracking down. You know, the government wasn't coming into these small stores and stopping them.
Yeah, there's basically too much illegal activity for everything to be a priority.
Yeah. So Mickey Mouse isn't that interesting, but perhaps when characters like Batman or Superman become public domain, that could be fun. That could make for some interesting products. But like with Mickey Mouse, it would be gradual, a year at a time from when things are released. So the first year that Superman was out, he didn't fly. So in 2034, when Superman enters the public domain, you can write your own Superman comic or make your own Superman movie, but you can't have him fly. You can't use some other characters from the series, but you would be able to use Lois Lane.
I think a Superman that could only leap tall buildings in a single bound would probably not do as well against a Superman that could fully fly.
No, it's like, just wait till he flies.
I mean, yes, people probably know I'm a Superman fan, so it's interesting to think about which powers were introduced when and through what way. A lot of it was through the radio show. And like, oh, he can do this now, and he can do that now. And then like in the Golden Age, he became almost too powerful, right? You're like, is he just moving planets easily and suns and blowing them out with his breath? Like, yeah, whatever, he can do anything. You're like, well, that doesn't really make a good narrative arc.
Yeah, well, I mean, it changes what the story's about, right?
Of course. Yes, Superman. All-Star Superman is one of the best, in case someone's looking for a recommendation in Adam's Mickey Mouse copyright segment. But the movie was more understandable than the books. In the comics, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Anyway, just my 2 cents.
So Mickey Mouse is public domain. So what? Do you want to make a Mickey Mouse movie? Well, they're making a Mickey Mouse horror movie. It was shot at Funhaven here in Ottawa. But I expect that to be about as successful as last year's Winnie the Pooh horror movie. Did anyone watch that? Perhaps it's only fitting that a Disney character joined the public domain, as the company has been making movies based on popular public domain characters for the past century. Anyone is able to make their own Snow White, Little Mermaid, or Rapunzel movie, but they won't be able to make them with the Disney versions of those characters for many, many years. This hasn't caused any catastrophic problems for Disney in the past. I don't expect Mickey Mouse being in the public domain will do anything to weaken their stranglehold on the world's entertainment industry with their many, many copyrighted characters. Star Wars won't be public domain until 2072, and even then, you won't be able to make a Jar Jar movie right away, so what's the point?
I won't do a silly Jar Jar voice. That is a great point, Adam. The copyright is in the news, as people may know, not only for Mickey purposes, but because OpenAI, the AI company, is being sued by the New York Times, saying, hey, look, you trained on all this copyright material. And depending on what you read, the AI company is like, well, of course, we need the copyright material, all of it. How else could we possibly train these systems? And it really is, as soon as you, as a human, publish something on the internet, in most, say, Western countries at least, it's automatically copyrighted. That's just how it is. It's copyright by default. So for my book, once it exists, it is copyrighted. Now I could go through, as you said, the extra process of registering it in the United States, and that would be more prudent, but just it existing is sufficient in some ways. So I think it's interesting how this is going to play out, of whether AI systems will be able to use this data, copyrighted data, to train their systems, which is a different use case for the most part than purely like a Mickey Mouse movie for commercial purposes.
Yeah, there's a difference between, it's not quite just reproducing an original work. Is it something more like a human person looking at a picture of Mickey Mouse and then from memory drawing a Mickey Mouse? Maybe, but that doesn't mean it's really exactly the same. So. Yeah,
I agree. It's but the issues might be like, well, if we gave you the first 10% of the top of Mickey's head And it's like, oh, I can just reproduce perfectly the other 90%. Like, that seems like you maybe just are regurgitating it. And that's not usually what they do, right? They generate, as we said, but the generation can be so good it looks like copying. Yeah. Well, that's a case to watch. Yeah. Or maybe to have watched by the time you hear this. Well, thank you, Adam. And thanks for listening once again. We learned that poinsettias are not that toxic. You can enjoy them as much as you want for the most part. And that you could make your own Mickey Mouse movie, but unless you're really skilled, it's probably not going to make you any money. Steamboat Willie styles.
That's fair.
Until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, cuboids.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
Jesus, man. Even you have to now edit it out. And you have to make sure you edit it out.
I have to make sure I edit that out.
First show without... Yeah, well, first show without Pat and Christina goes off the rails. Great.
I think I'm...
Why don't you edit that part out, too?
Throw back to copyright.
Why don't you just not put that in there, Adam?
I won't mention it.